good spot to get started now. So once again, everyone, thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's presentation. We're going to be talking about social media in your recruiting process and how to handle that, how to look at it from the college coach perspective, and anything else that anyone may have questions about moving forward here. Before I get into it, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Mike. I'm a senior recruiting analyst here at Sports Recruits, mainly working with student athletes who are looking for additional support in the process, whether that be with contacting college coaches, planning for events, helping out with the video side of things, and also sometimes even reviewing and looking over the social media of my student athletes that I work with. This is something that's going to be a very pivotal role in how you guys handle and operate it. So we're really excited to talk about it tonight. But without further ado, let's get into what some of the topics are going to be. So we'll start off, first of all, just with kind of just giving you some statistics. Some of the statistics are a little outdated because there hasn't been really as many studies on social media in the last couple of years as it's changed significantly so quickly. But we'll go over kind of the most recent information that we have as it stands right now. Then we'll go over a rule that still is in effect today, known as the click, don't type rule, just kind of explaining how that affects college coaches and how they can handle and operate the social media on their end. That'll kind of take us a little further into college coaches, and then also we'll give you some advice on how to handle your social media moving forward. We'll also do a quick recap on the NIL rules, not necessarily directly related to social media at all times, but for the most part, people typically do have some sort of branded posts and things of that nature. Mostly going to be for college athletes, and we're also going to discuss that a little bit further. And then, as always, for all of our webinars, we are going to have some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. For anyone who does have any questions, feel free to utilize the Q&A portion and the chat box, and I'll do my best to get to as many of those once we get to that portion of the meeting. But let's get right into it. Again, thank you all so much for your patience, but let's just talk about some numbers here for starters. So, as it stands right now, the most recent information that we're able to pull is from a survey done by Fieldhouse Media in 2019, talking about the percent of college student athletes on social media. You can see Facebook was pretty popular back then. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case for a lot of the student athletes here now. And on the right side, you can see the percent of college coaches who use social media for an insight of a recruit's character. There wasn't available information on Snapchat, or the numbers are a little bit lower on Instagram, as it probably is right now. And again, Facebook being pretty high. Understand that this is something that's ever changing, and wherever student athletes are spending time when it comes to their phones, college coaches are going to make sure they have access to that as well. So just because TikTok isn't listed specifically on one of these two slides as it stands right now, it doesn't mean that you have free reign to post whatever you want on TikTok, right? Understand that anything that you're putting out there is completely public, and it could be seen by college coaches directly, whether it be something that a large portion of student athletes use or something that college coaches might not necessarily seem like they're going to be there. These are the different types of things that you can look out for sure. Let's see here. Just going to stop sharing my screen for just a second here, everyone. Looks like I just had a bit of an issue with my presentation, but it looks like we are good to go. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second and we'll get right back into it. But yeah, biggest thing when it comes to the social media platforms that all of you use, just keep in mind that this is something that's really going to play a very important role in college coaches having the ability to see kind of what you have access to and what you're willing to put out there in public. We're going to talk about private accounts and things of that nature a little bit later, but we'll talk a little bit further about kind of, how that doesn't always necessarily protect you from it being seen by someone who may not necessarily follow you or something. We'll get into now the click, don't type rule. And so for those who aren't aware of what that is, that's essentially the legislation that college coaches must follow when it comes to how they use social media in their recruiting efforts. So I'll just read it quickly. An athletic department staff member may take actions such as a like, a favorite, a republish, or retweet on social media platforms that indicate approval of content on social media that was generated by users of the platforms other than institutional staff members or representatives of an institution's athletic interest. So essentially what that is saying is if a college coach is interested in you and you post a clip of you scoring a goal, that coach is allowed to click favorite. If it's Twitter or X, they're allowed to hit like. If it's on another social media platform, they are not allowed to comment the thumbs up emoji or the fire emoji or really any comment for that matter. These are the types of things that coaches have to be really careful about. So again, they're allowed to retweet, republish, favorite, share, any of those types of actions when it comes to social media. They are not allowed to directly comment on anything that a student athlete is doing at this point in time. Another thing to keep in mind is when it comes to how these college coaches are able to directly correspond with student athletes as well. So direct correspondence, that particularly means if you're having a one-on-one conversation with a coach. This is a text message, a phone call, an email, or even a direct message on one of the social media sites. That cannot happen until September 1st or June 15th of your junior year, depending on the sport that you play. Men's ice hockey would be one sport where that date is January 1st. Going into your sophomore year. But we've done a ton of webinars on the importance of June 15th, September 1st. So if you're not sure where your sport is going to fall in line with that, we'll be more than happy to make that available to you. And feel free to look at our other recordings to access that information. But if you're someone who is a sophomore as it stands right now, a Division I or Division II coach would not be able to communicate with you directly prior to September 1st or June 15th. Keep in mind, Division III programs, they don't have those same legislation, so they might have a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to having these direct conversations, whether it be on the phone or through social media. And also keep in mind that this correspondence must be sent directly to the prospective student athlete or their parent or guardian, and it must be private, meaning a college coach cannot post a tweet or post something on X tagging a prospective student athlete saying how impressed they were by a play that they had, or saying congratulations that they won the state championship. It would have to be through direct messages. It would have to be through something that isn't open for everyone to see. So those are just a couple of things that college coaches have to keep in mind in terms of navigating and looking at student athletes that can't be so upfront and forward about how they're taking advantage of utilizing that at this point in time. To get a little bit more into college coaches and social media, the way that they utilize it, they're going to follow student athletes. They're going to try and message prospective student athletes when the opportunity presents itself. They're going to want to try and publicize and brand their school or program, or maybe even what their coaching style is. And also keep in mind that if a coach has an active Instagram account or a TikTok or a Facebook or whatever it is that you're following them on, it doesn't necessarily mean that that coach is utilizing it and managing it on their own. At this point in time, there's a ton of coaches out there, especially at the higher level of college athletics, where there might be a media team behind that. There might be someone who's kind of just going through and just making sure that that they're trying to stay relatively active on social media, so that account is trying to receive engagement in some way. So, it doesn't always necessarily mean that a coach might be the one who's looking or posting everything that's out there. It doesn't mean that you should change the way that you go about utilizing your social media as well. But yeah, when it comes down to it, college coaches, there are some definitely coaches who are a little bit on the younger side who are going to be much more comfortable with utilizing the platforms. There are going to be other coaches who kind of just use it more so as a way just to kind of keep tabs on the student athletes that they're looking at, or their current student athletes as well. So I think it's important for everyone here to understand kind of how college coaches want to utilize these things, whether it be promoting their own school, promoting their own message that they have for the program that they're trying to build, or keep an eye on a lot of you on this call here tonight, which is going to be those prospective student athletes. We get a question a lot of how often do college coaches actually use social media? Are they really spending their time there? And this is an example of a colleague of ours who actually had a direct conversation with the coach through Facebook Messenger about 10 years, almost 15 years ago at this point, 12 years ago, whatever it might be. Still very important to keep in mind because it gives you a mindset of, hey, this is how college coaches might reach out to you in some way, right? If they follow you on X, if they follow you on Instagram, it is possible they might reach out to you through an Instagram direct message and say, hey, look, we like your style. We love what you're playing. Let's try and have you come to a camp. These are the types of things that you want to keep your mind on to make sure your notifications are turned on for these types of situations. One thing that we would give some advice of, that this particular student athlete maybe didn't do the best job of, is being mindful of when you're sending these messages. Treat it like it's an email, right? You wouldn't want to send an email to a coach at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Try and stay in those relative business hours, if you will. If it's somewhere in between 8 a.m. and 7 or 8 p.m. your local time, that's probably a safe bet. If the coach has reached out to you at sometimes a little bit outside of that, like you can see this coach actually sent a message around 11 p.m., feel free to reply to that in that time, but just do your best just to not kind of catch them at all hours of the night. You never know how their notifications are set up, and you wouldn't want to be the reason that a coach woke up in the middle of the night because their phone buzzed or whatever it might be. But just a couple of things to keep in mind. And again, coaches do actively use social media now, even more so than 2011, like in this situation right here. And then, we're going to talk about how you, the student athlete, can utilize your social media, not only just to be protective of losing interest from schools and things of that nature, but also how you can promote yourself positively. And I think that's something that ends up being kind of lost in these types of conversations. So you can see here, there's a couple of situations of college coaches who found themselves in situations where, they had to stop recruiting a particular student athlete because what they put out there in the world to see, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, that might have been the best opportunity for that student athlete or anything. But when it comes down to it, when you're going out of your way to be very opinionated, or you're talking about situations or issues that make people very uncomfortable, or it just ends up being a spot where it could be taken negatively or in a way that you wouldn't want someone to look at or perceive what you're saying, it is something that could do some harm. So just understand that everything that you're putting out there for the world to see, even if a coach isn't following you, it is out there and it could make their way over to them, right? So just really be mindful of what you're posting, what you're sharing, what you're retweeting, if that ends up being something that you utilize, and also what your friends might be putting out there if you're going to be involved, if you're tagged in a video, if you're sending memes to someone. That's something that we've seen people get in trouble for as well. So any action, whether it be in public or just even as you're going through and looking at your timelines, anything could be looked at and be seen by a college coach. So be really mindful that this is something that could really find their way in front of a college coach at any point in time. In terms of protecting your brand, again, some older information here as well when it comes to college student athletes who admit to posting something inappropriate on social media. You can see Snapchat was definitely a place where people felt a little bit more open-minded because, it's kind of marketed as a place where the information disappears. Nothing disappears. People can screen record. People can always kind of take advantage of, gathering that information that has been sent out to the public. So again, keep in mind, anything that you put out there in the world to see, it could be found by a college coach. It could be found by someone in your family. So the easiest way to make sure that, that doesn't find its way back and hurt your recruiting process is to just stay away from posting anything inappropriate at all times. That's really going to be the safest and the best way that you guys can really make sure you're going to be in a spot where you're not putting yourself at any risk at any point in time. When it comes to privacy settings, again, this isn't necessarily an end all be all. It doesn't let you off the hook, but you could make certain information a little bit more private. I've actually talked to people about, in some instances, it might actually make sense for you to be public because you're just gonna be more mindful about what you're putting out there at the same time too, right? So again, when it comes to what you're liking, what you're retweeting, what your usernames are, what email addresses you might be using, these are all things that could play a factor and all things that college coaches are going to look at that could play a role in how they look at you. So again, just a couple of different things to keep in mind when it comes to how you want to protect yourself. And if you are going to be a little bit more public about things that are out there, again, just being really mindful about what college coaches will have access to if that ends up being the case. When it comes to, just promoting your brand overall, right? A great way to utilize social media is to also follow the teams and coaches that you have a direct interest in, right? That could be a talking point for a future phone call or a future visit that you have at that school. And you can say, hey, part of why I was interested in your program is because I saw that motivational speech that you put out, prior to a big rivalry game. And that seemed like the type of culture that I want to be a part of. Maybe there's, campus tours where you kind of get a chance to see the facilities in a little bit of a different light. It's all going to be great information for you to take in, and it's going to make you a lot more prepared for those direct conversations whenever you have direct interest from some of these schools. Also, if you showcase that you have a direct interest by liking or following or favoriting or whatever it might be, just kind of really just making sure that you're showing that coaching staff that you're keeping tabs on what's going on. It just is another way to kind of promote that overall interest that you have. A great thing that we see a lot of the student athletes that we work with do is publicize the positive accolades that they're receiving, right? Whether that be in the classroom, on the field, posting highlight clips, things that they're involved in within the community. Those are all things that you can really utilize social media, and it's a really powerful tool to take advantage of, right? We've seen people time and time again when it comes to, there could be a clip that ends up getting passed around where someone makes a really great play, and that ends up getting in front of the eyeballs of a lot of different college coaches. It doesn't necessarily just have to be on the field or on court stuff though, right? We want to make sure that you're putting yourself out there, painting yourself in the positive image that you have, and also making sure that you have your sports recruits profile available for coaches to see as well. For those of you who aren't aware of how you can do that, you can just take the link at the bottom of the message. For those of you who have pro accounts with us, just copy and paste that link and then add it to any social media platform that you use. We've seen people put it in their Instagram bios. We've seen people put it in the tops of their Twitter pages. We've seen people just throw it out there when they ever have new highlight videos that they want coaches to have a chance to take a look at. This is also a great opportunity to get your name out there and just, again, really just kind of promote yourself, what you're specifically with what you're doing on the field and also in the classroom at the same time. Something that comes up a lot when I would say that I've seen a little bit more recently is we actually have seen student athletes actually make social media accounts specifically for their sport. So that might be Mike Babbage 2024 midfielder would be the name, would be the Instagram handle or something to that effect. That's also a great way just to know that that's going to be where you're going to kind of post everything lacrosse related or soccer related or whatever it is the sport that you play. So that's something that, again, we don't want you necessarily feel scared of social media, that you don't feel like you can't be active on it or by any means. It is a powerful tool. It is a great way for you to gather information about the programs that you're looking into. And it's also a great way to gather that research, like I was saying before. But feel free to promote yourself positively. And if you're not sure if there is something that could be a little too opinionated or something that might be on the fence, chances are it's probably better off just not to press send. But you can always ask for a second opinion, whether it be from someone at home, a friend, a coach, or anyone that you kind of trust their judgment when it comes to these things. Okay, and what we're going to wrap up with before we get into everyone's questions, and I see a few have come in here so far, so we'll do our best to take care of those. Just talk about the NIL rules, and for those who aren't aware, kind of what exactly that means for college athletes. So at this point, over the last couple of years, there has been some change in legislation where NCAA athletes can now receive compensation for their name, image, and likeness. Meaning if they wanted to sign a brand deal, if they wanted to sell t-shirts with their face on it, now they have the ability to do so, and there won't be any risk of them losing any sort of eligibility. Schools can no longer prohibit them from having that compensation. There is an interim protocol when it's really kind of a state by state basis when it comes to how this legislation works. And that's something that could be changing potentially really at any point in time. And there has been a policy put together where anyone who is receiving these NIL deals, there's going to be someone within your athletic department who's going to be responsible for carrying that out and making sure that you're going to be in a position where it's not going to put you at risk. It's important for if you do receive any of these opportunities, there can't be anything including gambling or alcohol or anything along those lines. It's going to have to be something that really is going to be above board. And as long as you're reporting anything that you are receiving interest about, again, this is going to be more so for those of you who are in college. It's something that we haven't seen as much at the high school ranks as it stands right now. You should be in a good spot when it comes to, being able to utilize your brand if you are someone who does have a bit of a following on social media at the same time. In terms of how it affects college athletes a little bit further, again, they can have sponsored posts, they can monetize autographs or create their own merchandise, like I was saying before. They can make appearances. And like I was saying, when it comes to alcohol, gambling, or unlawful activity, obviously that's something that can't be promoted from a student athlete when you're representing, a school or an organization or a team or whatever it might be. So, I think when it comes to kind of hearing what this is all about, that's something that's really going to play a major factor in terms of how, student athletes are getting recruited moving forward. That is going to play a role for some people when it comes to, hey, what NIL opportunities are there for your student athletes? That's something that ends up being a part of a discussion, especially for really highly touted recruits, for sure. I don't necessarily think that should be the make or break reason, because that's something that you might not necessarily be able to rely on after you move on to college, but it definitely is something where there's a ton of student athletes today that are being able to take advantage of that. I'm sure we'll get some more questions about the NIL side of things. And I know there's been some information in the news about there's going to be a class action lawsuit potentially when it comes to student athletes receiving a revenue share from games. That's something that's still up in the air, so I can't really speak much to on that. But we know that it's there. We understand that when it comes to college athletes, there is potentially a chance for them to now receive money directly from the NCAA or directly from their conferences, rather than creating brand deals and sponsor posts with outside organizations. So something to keep in mind when it comes to that as well. And then when it comes to high school, there's a majority of schools that aren't allowing athletes to monetize their NIL. And if you are in a state where it is allowed, you still want to make sure that you are contacting your athletic director immediately before you accept anything. You do not want to put yourself at risk of losing collegiate eligibility because you accepted a sponsored post or, received money in a situation that did put you at risk. So just the safest way to go about it, even if you have been told by the organization that it's the right way to go about it, just make sure you're reaching out to people that you trust within your school, particularly at the highest ranks of the athletic department, before anything is signed, before anything is completed on your end. All right, everyone. So that's kind of everything that I wanted to go through here tonight. And I thank everyone so much for their patience to go through it. I think the biggest takeaways before we get into the questions more than anything else is just making sure that you're being smart about what you put out there, understanding about what college coaches have the access to do in terms of click, don't type, and how they use and operate the different accounts that you are taking advantage of having at this point. And again, not to be scared of social media, but really just make sure that you are promoting a positive image of yourself and you're not putting anything out there that you wouldn't want your dad to see or your grandma to see, or insert whatever person that you would kind of want to feel that would feel has a really good kind of mindset when it comes to things that you don't want to put out there for the world. So, that's everything that I wanted to go through here tonight, everyone. Thanks. Really appreciate you giving me a chance to do that. So let's just go through some of the questions here. And then we'll see how many we can get through before we run out of time. Let's see. So first one, this is something that we actually see a lot of. Is it okay to tag multiple college teams on a post on Instagram or Twitter, or should we send them one by one? I think this is more of a personal preference. I personally don't think it's the most valuable way to get your name out there to to different programs. If you post a video of yourself and you tag 7 or 8 different schools, I feel like it just doesn't have the same personalization that we kind of hope for. One thing at Sports Recruits that we're really big on is making sure when you are reaching out to coaches by email, you're giving yourself an opportunity to make it very clear to that school why you're interested in them as a program. When you're tagging multiple schools in one post, I think it just takes a little bit away from that. It has worked out for people. So again, that's more of a personal preference. It isn't necessarily the exact science when it comes to those types of things, but it is something that definitely comes up in mind. And, I definitely think it's something that's going to be more of how you kind of want to handle your social media, whether it's more so, on the private side of things and being more direct when it comes to messaging. And that's what something like Sports Recruits gives you the ability to do. But if you do want to kind of actively get your name out there and let coaches know, hey, I want you to see this, and these are the other schools that I'm interested in, it is sometimes a way that people utilize leverage at the same time too. So let's see. So is there different rules for coaches reaching out from D3, D2 or D3 programs? So yes. So when it comes to Division 1 and Division 2, there's a lot more restrictive rules when it comes to direct communication. That was what we were referring to September 1st and June 15th at the beginning of this call. D3 is just a little bit more lax when it comes to those things. So there's not necessarily an exact date when that communication can open up with Division 3 programs. So if you're a 2026 student athlete and a D3 coach is interested in speaking with you on the phone, they can do that, where a D1 or D2 coach would have to wait until the summer for that to happen. So that's the difference between a Division 2 and Division 3 program at this point. Someone also wrote in about, a separate Instagram account just for lacrosse and your personal account. Again, I think that's great. I think sometimes it could get a little confusing in terms of kind of managing multiple accounts, but I've seen it work for a lot of people in the past. It's also a great way just to kind of keep everything separate, and you kind of stick to that same brand of promoting yourself within your sport over and over again. So I have no issue with it whatsoever, and I do think it is a good idea for a lot of student athletes. Let's see. Okay, it looks like we just have a couple of repeats here, guys, and then we'll see what we can do. Okay, this is actually a great question. So how does a student promote themselves for academic success without feeling like bragging? Or is it best only to promote it if you got an official award or accolade so that it isn't subjective? This is a fantastic question. I think when it comes down to it, it's really going to be more about kind of how you feel about getting that information out there, right? There are some people who feel really proud of themselves when they get a 4.0 for the semester, and they're more than willing to kind of get that information out there for the world to see. If you just feel like that's disingenuous for yourself and you would rather just make your transcript available on your Sports Recruits profile, then you can send an email privately to the coaching staff and say, hey, coach, just want to give you a heads up. I have new academic information for you to look at. I think I'm going to be in a great spot when it comes to applying to your school. If you want to see what my transcript looks like, you can just click on the link below. So again, I know that kind of sounds like a non-answer, but it really is more of a personal preference, right? If you feel like it is going to be a little bit more on the braggy side of things, then I think you're the type of person that would probably respond a little bit better to having your social, rather than being very open on social media, reaching out to the schools that you have the most direct interest in, and then just contacting them and giving them the updates that you would like them to know about you. Let's see. What are the most relevant social media sites? I would say Twitter is definitely pretty big in a lot of sports. Instagram is pretty big. Facebook, I would say, with the student athletes of today, I wouldn't say it's as popular. Obviously we've seen TikTok really blow up over the last couple of years. That's probably where a majority of student athletes are, which means that's where a majority of the college coaches are more than anything else. So I would say Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are kind of the big three that I would look at as it stands right now. Okay. see. Is it okay in 10th grade to reach out to coaches? So yes, I didn't want to confuse anyone, but keep in mind, so those recruiting rules that I was referring to, so June 15th going into your junior year, September 1st going into your junior year, those rules are specifically for college coaches directly, not for student athletes. Meaning if you're in ninth grade, if you're in 10th grade, you can reach out to a Division I, Division II, any program that you would like, and you are not at risk of losing any sort of eligibility by doing so. So feel free, if you are in 10th grade, contact as many college programs as you would like, get your name on their radar, try and get evaluated. There just might be some limitations on how that coach can respond to you at this point in time. So absolutely, anyone who is in 9th or 10th grade who wants to start promoting themselves to these college coaches, whether it be on social media or again, on your Sports Recruits profile by emailing them directly, you have you don't have to worry about any sort of recruiting rules or regulations being broken by you doing that on your end. Student athletes can feel very comfortable in doing that. Let's see. Got a lot of good questions in here, guys. Thank you so much. I'm just trying to sort out the ones that we haven't answered just yet. Someone reached out about uploading full games to their Sports Recruits profile, and they're just asking for a recommendation on how they should video share and kind of how they would take advantage of it. One thing that I would recommend looking at is for those of you who do have full games in your profile, Sports Recruits actually does have a built-in highlight reel editor that you can take advantage of. That's going to give you a chance to actually go in and cut out the plays that you think would be the best thing that you would want college coaches to see. So again, if you scored a goal, if you had a great pass or a nice assist or, a really good defensive stop, anything that it was that you wanted to kind of isolate more than anything else, you are going to have the ability to create those clips in our built-in highlight video editor. Some people like to use outside places, which is totally understandable, but keep in mind, just by having a Sports Recruits profile, you have a video editing software, just by logging into your account. It's a great question. Let's see. It looks like we have time for about one or two more here, guys. And again, thank you all so much for being so involved in this. I know this is a really hot button issue when it comes to people wanting to make sure they're going about this the right way. Let's see. How close or far away from a tournament or showcase should you reach out to coaches? Our typical recommendation when it comes to that is usually the week leading up to the event, 7 to 10 days when possible. We understand sometimes you might not get access to your schedule for that event until 3 or 4 days before. So in that event, it's okay to wait a little bit longer. But the biggest thing is just staying away from sending out that email at 10 p.m. the night before an event starts, right? Best case scenario, try and get that information sent out about a week in advance whenever you have the opportunity to do so. See. Someone asked about posting transcripts. So we actually have on your Sports Recruits profiles, if you click on the profile button, then you click on where it says academic, there's actually going to be a place for you to upload your transcripts directly if you choose to do so. It just gives you a chance. It doesn't have to be an official transcript by any means. It's something that could be a report card. Sometimes people put up progress reports, anything that you just want college coaches to have access to from an academic standpoint. You can utilize that transcript button. We've seen people utilize it for their SAT and ACT results as well. Just a place for you to make relevant academic information accessible to college coaches really easily. All right, looks like we have time for about one more here, guys. Let's just see what we have here. Just going to try and answer something that we haven't gotten to just yet. Okay. Sorry, I'm just seeing a good amount of repeats here, guys. Just going to try and find one more question before we wrap up here. All right, it looks like I have two that I can answer really quickly. So someone asks, is there a certain amount of colleges that should be contacted in a week or monthly basis? Is there a rule of thumb for this? Not necessarily, but I would say when it comes to schools that you should be targeting, the sweet spot that we typically recommend is anywhere from 20 to 30 schools on your list. You might not contact all 30 schools in a month, and that's totally okay. But when it comes down to just kind of like putting yourself in a situation where you can cast a wide net and have a large amount of schools that you are considering for yourself, I would say in that 20 to 30 range is great. If you can end up breaking that up over a 2-month period or a 3-month period, whatever kind of works with your schedule is totally fine. Then the last one here, should video clips include music, fan sounds, or be muted? Again, much more of a personal preference thing. If you do use music, make sure you're using music that is appropriate. There are definitely college coaches out there that don't love hearing curse words and things of that nature, or music that is automatically added on there. I think there are certain sports where fan sounds and just the raw audio works out a little bit better. I would say baseball and softball are two sports where I typically tell people not to include music because you want to hear the crack of the bat and things of that nature. So I think it really comes down to the sport that you play, and also how much you really kind of want to include. There's coaches there that also will just mute it on their end themselves as well. So more so of a personal preference. I would say baseball and softball are two sports where I typically would say not to use music, but outside of that, it's really going to come down to how you want to go about it. Just make sure that you're being careful. When you're choosing music, I would say more often than not, just use instrumentals because that guarantees you're not going to put yourself in a bad spot of people not liking what they're hearing. But I think that is all the time that we have here, everyone. Again, I see people asking about a recording. You will automatically be sent a recording of this at some point tomorrow. It also will be posted on our YouTube page, so be on the lookout for that. We appreciate everyone taking the time to watch this webinar here tonight. If you ever have any topics that you would want us to cover down the road, feel free to reach out at help@sportsrecruits.com, and we'll do our best to kind of cover any topics that you think you would benefit most from. So really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you all so much. Best of luck moving forward through this, through this recruiting process, and we hope to see you on another webinar sometime soon. Have a great rest of your night, everyone. Thanks again.